So, Jason, I'll hit you with this. It's only been 2 games and it's only been inferior opponents, but is there anybody that has stood out to you on either side of the ball, and not necessarily in some kind of starring role or starting role, but anybody who's gained some reps that you think has made an impact and could factor into the season maybe a little bit more than you anticipated?
Yeah, we could start just from a team perspective on the offensive side of the ball. I think the good thing is, and I saw a stat that this hasn't happened in quite some time, is Oklahoma's went through 2 games with they haven't turned the ball over a single time. So being able to protect the ball, I think, has been a really good thing. So I think on the offensive side of the ball, I mean, it's kind of funny. There's obviously in every fan base, there's armchair quarterbacks out there, right? That are specifically at the quarterback position that's going to challenge, everything that goes on. And I think Oklahoma has a standard that quarterbacks just really Oklahoma fans, I should say, have a standard that quarterbacks are. It's hard for them to live up to, right? But I think Dillon Gabriel has done fine. I think he's done really well. 5 touchdowns, no interceptions, hasn't even really come close to an interception. So I think he's performing the way that I and everyone else, and at least nationally, anticipated him, being able to play. So I think he's one that continues to obviously play well. Marcus Major, I think, is really made a big move. And really presented himself with an opportunity to be get more carries, at least even number of carries with Eric Gray. And it's not really a surprise, Mark, but Marvin Mims has been the best, obviously the best wide receiver on this team. But I think Theo Weiss has played well. He hasn't got a ton of opportunities, but I think he's really played well. On the defensive side of the ball, Reggie Grimes is mentioned here. Yeah, he's performed extremely well from a defensive lineman already. I think he's not necessarily came out of nowhere. I think he's a guy that Oklahoma people thought that he had an opportunity to have a good year, but I think 4.5 sacks in 2 games is not something that anyone really anticipated. So he's a guy. Isaiah Coe played really well in the middle, and he got his first start there. I mean, I think it's not necessarily a surprise, but Danny Stetsman playing really well at the linebacker spot. And I think we talked about Billy Bowman. And Bowman is a guy that a lot of people didn't necessarily know what to think, and we've talked about this a lot, but he's unfortunately had situations where he has not he's not had consistency because he's had to move from different spots. He was at played safety, played nickel, played corner a little bit, and lost a lot of confidence, but he's playing really, really well at that safety position this year. Helped force a fumble in that last game. And then there's a lot of skepticism on Jayden Davis, but he's played pretty well so far. Oklahoma's not really given up much in the pass game, which you like. They've even playing a base defense, they've not really given up any large plays. I think 24 yards is the most the most yardage in one particular play, so not a lot of chunk plays. So yeah, I think those are some of the guys that I think that, at least initially, I think you'd like to see on the offensive side of the ball. Jalil Farouk be able to make a little bit more of a impact in terms of that. Braden Willis, is blocking really, really well. Had a couple of drops, but I think he can continue to be a big part of this offense for Oklahoma as well. And then just interesting, I mean, Jaren Kanak is not really playing a ton, but he's playing, in kind of some of the garbage time, and he's playing really, really well when he's in there. So he's a guy that might work his way into the rotation, mid to later in the season. But he's a guy that's probably off radar a little bit. But if he continues to play as well as he's playing in these, because Oklahoma's really not missing a beat defensively in the first couple of games when they brought him in. So I think he might be playing himself into a more of a focal role within this offense.